Hello, I'm David F. Sandberg, the director of Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and let's talk about it. So you're about to see the DC logo with all the characters in it, the animated logo. It was something that I forgot to put on the first Shazam, and I didn't really realize it until I saw people online having all these conspiracy theories of like, oh, they didn't put it on there because Shazam's not actually part of the DCEU, or maybe Warner Brothers is moving away from the DCEU, and I had to go online and be like, guys, I just forgot to put it on. And people didn't believe me because they were like, well, the studio would have seen it and they would have put it on there, but no one said anything. You don't actually have to use that particular logo. You can use any DC logo. But for this movie, I wanted to make sure that it was on there. So that was like the first thing we put in. And this is the one shot we actually shot in Greece, a drone shot over the Acropolis there, and our own museum. There is a museum nearby, a real one, but we weren't allowed to use that, so we had to create our own and design it with our own design and put in a CG one there. And this set was one of my favorites because there's no blue screen there. It was just a big museum, and we don't even see everything that we built because we had like a lobby and we had little areas that you could walk into next to it, and it was just really cool to have our own museum to play around with, and you can destroy things, and yeah, it just felt like you were in an actual museum. The only thing added is the ceiling. In some of these shots where we see the ceiling, that's like right here, that's CG, but everything else is real.
Broke 3 trash compactors. Okay.
Now,
that's enough.
It was funny because Rizwan here, who plays the docent, he's perfect for this, but he was recommended by Peter Safran, who had worked with him on Peacemaker. And I was like, but wait, Peacemaker, that's in the same universe as Shazam. It's all the DC universe. If he's already plays a character there, we can't really use him here. But Peter was like, no, he's a super tiny part. Like, it's just a quick little thing. I was like, okay. And then after we shot this, I saw Peacemaker, which is great, by the way. And he's in the even in the intro dancing around with a mop. He plays like a janitor, and he's like in a couple of episodes. But it's like, maybe he has a twin brother or something who works at a museum in Greece. Now, Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu was like dream casting. We started talking about like, let's aim high for our bad guys. And like the first name who came up was like someone like Helen Mirren to play Hespera. And we reached out to her and she said yes right away. So it's like, oh, we got our dream casting. Like, who else can we get? And then started talking about Lucy Liu, and she wanted to do it as well. And just got really lucky with casting. Now, this scene was actually a bit longer originally. Hopefully we can put a lot of the cut stuff on the Blu-ray or in the extras where you can see some of this, because the film was it was just a little too much movie. We cut almost like half an hour out of it because it was just way too long. So we had some extra bit with the guards here. We had one of the guards pulls a gun on the sisters, and we had this great prop where Hespera made the gun melt or like heat up in his hands. And the prop guys actually built an actual prop. Like, it looked like a proper gun, but it had this kind of light in it, and it was painted in a way that when you turned on the light, it looked like it was glowing red hot. So it was a little bit of a bummer to cut just because I like that prop so much. But there's enough cool stuff in here, like all the breaking of the statue here and all the people turning to stone, which was fun to shoot because when we come out of the smoke here and everyone is frozen, we shot this with all the extras in these positions, standing perfectly still. And it looked really cool because they were really good at it. And the way it was done was that we shot that as a reference. And then they had to sort of remember what position they were in. and then go get 3D scanned in those same positions. Some were sort of better than others at remembering what positions they were actually in.
We can do nothing.
But I think it turned out pretty great. And we're about to come into a scene that was actually added a little later when Shazam is at the pediatrician. We felt like we needed to have a little bit more. We needed to tell how Shazam was feeling, like what his situation is. Like he doesn't really know his place as a superhero in this world. Like what he's contributing to the world, because this is a world with other superheroes in it.
Me.
And you're about to see a little cameo here by Annabelle in there.
Right.
Annabelle was in the first movie as well, in the pawn shop. So I felt like I wanted to try and put her in here. And she's in James Wan's Aquaman too. So Annabelle is a part of the DC universe.
Like you're.
Now, for this movie, people have been asking, like, well, what happened with Mr. Mind that we set up in the first movie? Well, we actually originally had him part of this movie when the story was just sort of at a treatment stage before we had written the full script. He was part of it, and it was sort of Mr. Mind's plan to let the sisters into the world. But it was just too much movie. It was fun, but it was just a lot. Like there was this whole prison break where, because Savannah's in prison, and Mr. Mind like took him over and sort of puppeteered him to get him out of prison. And there was even a scene actually where at one point was a scene where there was a fight and Savannah actually died. And I was like, well, you can't do that because Savannah is like the Lex Luthor of this world. You can't kill, Lex Luthor in your second movie. So this video game you're about to see here is something we did ourselves. Rather than try to buy the rights to an actual game, we could get exactly what we wanted. And it's actually really hard these days to find games that are like co-op, couch co-op, where you can play it with a split screen, because most of it is just online these days. So we kind of had to create our own. This was actually the very first scene we shot. And what usually ends up happening is that you kind of you reshoot the very first thing you shoot, because you haven't really found your groove yet, and things can be kind of awkward. And that's what happened on the first Shazam. The first thing we shot was the reveal of Savannah when he was doing interviews with people who had been through the Rock of Eternity, and we ended up reshooting it. But this time I was like, I don't want to end up reshooting it, so I did a lot of takes, tried to get it as good as possible. And, one of these setups I actually did like 28 takes of, which is a record for me. I usually never do that many takes, but I was like, I don't want to reshoot it. But it freaked out the first AD because, he was not expecting to do 28 takes. And he was really worried, like, is this what it's going to be? But I was like, no. It's the first day. And we'll find our groove, and then we'll get going, and that's sort of what happened. But it didn't, it turned out good enough, I think. But it's not quite what we had in mind. Like me and Jula, the DP, we talked about it as a reference, like Home Alone, when we first meet all the kids or the family in that movie. It has this very busy feel. It's just a lot of people talking, lots of activity in a house, and you sort of go from people to people. And that's sort of what we wanted here. And it doesn't quite feel that busy. It still works. But Jula was, throughout the shoot, he was asking me, when are we going to reshoot the opening? But we never did.
Bye, Mom. Bye.
Bye, Rosa.
And when they walk out here, there's one little Easter egg that Torpa and Unidal, that's spray painted on that fence. Those are schools that I went to. my little hometown in Jönköping, Sweden. So not many people will get that. And this was a scene that was added later as well, because I realized we didn't have an early scene of the kids turning into superheroes. So it's like, well, what if people haven't seen the first movie? They might be a little confused if you just see kids leaving a house and then adult superheroes show up here. Like, who are these people? So it's like, okay, we need to add a scene where the kids turn into superheroes. Unfortunately, Ross and Adam were unavailable when we were shooting that. So we had to shoot them with stand-ins and then take their heads from other shots in the movie and sort of paste them on the heads there. But it's quick enough where I think it works. And the woman singing here is my wife, Lotta, who is in all of my movies. And she was in the first Shazam. She was working with Dr. Savannah, and she died. She turns into ash, basically. So it was like, oh, well, this is the first time I've done a sequel to one of my movies, but I want her in here. So it was like, oh, let's just, we lose the glasses. We put her hair up. She'll look different enough that, she's just a different character. Because, gotta have her in there. And this part is smaller than in the first one as well. So this bridge scene, VFX were done by Scanline. And like when we were shooting, all we had really was, we had a bunch of cars and we had the divider that divides the lanes on the bridge, and everything else is added afterwards. It was shot like on the backlot in Atlanta. But a lot of it works out quite well, I think. Now this, when she falls down here, she was in a rig. She was in a car that's actually gone vertical. It's on a rig where it can go down 90 degrees. The funny thing is that you can't really tell that much because her hair is up, but she has, like, we did things like put that ID card around her neck so it would, that you could see that the gravity is pulling on things. But it's almost like we could have shot it just horizontally and you couldn't have been able to tell.
It's really easy.
An interesting thing here is that this scene was originally not, it was just a regular scene that was kind of long. And then the first time I showed it to the studio, they were like, well, why don't you just have the song come back, the I Need a Hero, and do like a music video. So it's like quick and snappy, like a little montage. And it works out quite well, but it wasn't shot in a way, it wasn't meant to be music video. So we cut out a lot of dialogue and things because, whenever you have someone talking, you have to then lower the music and sort of come out of the moment. So it's shorter, but I think it's snappier and better this way. And now I'm really glad we could get this song. Because originally we had a different song that had the word hero in it. But that artist didn't want us to use the song. So we went with this one instead. And thankfully Bonnie Tyler said yes. Which was great because this is a more fun and upbeat song than the one we originally had, which was more of a slower sort of ballad.
That's my sidekick. Captain Every Power Junior.
Hey, Junior?
You're going to want to hold on tight.
It was really hot shooting all this because it's like, a big open, just parking lot kind of thing in the middle of summer in Atlanta. Now, this thing, you may be wondering, why was there so much smoke there that she goes through? Well, it's because it's a transition where she goes from a digidouble to the real Grace, hanging on wires. And that transition just didn't really work. Now, this is a motion control shot, by the way. So people have been shot separately and then composited together because they come in on wires and stuff. You can't shoot everyone at the same time because then the wires would be tangled up. But the Mary part of it, it was just a little too obvious when she transitioned from digi to real. We in these movies, you do a lot of those transitions from digi to real, but it's often when something happens during a quick move, like someone jumps and they turn into flying, or someone gets kicked and they turn into a digidouble. And when you try to do that smooth of a transition with a very steady camera, it was just too obvious. And these visual effects take a very long time to create. So you don't really find out what works and what doesn't until it's very late in the process. So the solution there was just like, well, let's add some smoke because, the bridge is collapsing and there's cars on fire and stuff like that. And so we just hide the transition with smoke. Now we get to see the new Rock of Eternity here, which the kids have turned into their lair, which was such a fun set. And I mean, the set decorators have had such a good time with it as well to just like make it, what would the kids do with this space? What kind of stuff would they put in here? And I made sure to have that earlier shot of a generator because just in case people are like, well, how are they getting electricity? How are they plugging all these things in? Well, right there's a generator. And if people ask like, well, wouldn't they like suffocate to death by having a generator indoors? Well, there's invincible superheroes. But it was a really fun set. And like they had arcade machines there and stuff. And it was actually... Usually, actors, when they're done, they leave the set, they go to their trailers or they hang out somewhere else. But that set, you couldn't get the actors away from because they were like sitting there playing video games or just hanging out. No, it was great.
You're late. Do not go in there.
But yeah, they had like an old school like game and they had the Mortal Kombat one. And all these sort of references to other superheroes and
big bridge.
Yeah.
A couple blunders, right? But we're gonna
And there's just a lot of fun details that I'm not even sure you noticed. Like the big wall behind the thrones is now a rock climbing wall, which the actors were like, oh, I want to climb it, but it was not built to actually be climbed, so they couldn't do that.
If I had gone to college.
In point of fact, is exactly the kind of smart thing that a smart person.
What we did with the bolts in this one, on the first movie, I was like, I want to do the bolt lighting up. I want to do it practically, and we did, but it caused a lot of problems. First of all, you had to do a lot of compromises with the suit, just the sort of the bulkiness of it and the design of what you could do with it, and the electricity would fail. So you had to do several takes.
The slime for toxicity because I'm starting to tingle.
And we wound up adding CGI on top of it anyway. So in this movie, I was like, let's not try and do it completely practically. Let's have a light that we put on there, but then they paint out the light and put this on instead. So you have an actual light there for some interactive light hitting their faces and stuff. But, it turns into a lot of visual effects shots instead. But I think it works better this way. And I was like, during the daytime, you don't really see the light anyway. So let's just have it metal in the daytime. And then during the night or in the Rock of Eternity, like darker spaces, the bolts light up. And, I think that makes sense. But there was a lot of you do a lot of VFX reviews, looking at shots, giving notes. And because of all these bolts being VFX shots, there was a lot of bolt shots. And you kind of there was a time there when I kind of regretted the choice to do it like this. But I think it turns out much better than it looked in the first movie. And I think the suits worked out better. We didn't have to do as many compromises. But, the VFX artist did a hell of a job doing things like, if you saw earlier when Eugene was playing around with the slime on him, you have transparent slime that's in front of this light and wires, and they have to basically put in a new bolt, but keep the slime on top of it. So it's a lot of repainting and keeping it all in there. It's like, I don't even know how you do it, but they did because it looks great. I mean, look at that Eugene with the slime in front of the bolt. This skeleton here is supposed to be a manticore skeleton. Manticore are the creatures you'll see later on that are sort of lions with big bat wings and a scorpion tail. I wanted to show that the god realm is really dead. And what better way to show it than with a skeleton? And, lots of sand and trees without leaves and just make it look dead. Now here we have the minions, which I think turned out really great. I mean, they're not in the movie a lot, but I really like how the armor turned out. Originally, I was working with like a concept artist because it's kind of a costume, but it's also a monster. So it's like I wasn't sure like who was going to design it. So I was working with the concept artists who were doing the monsters in the movie. And at first, I was going down this path of more like a traditional sort of knight, and I was like, it doesn't feel right. So I showed the images to Louise Mingenbach, who was the costume designer on the movie. And I was like, well, what do you think? And she was like, well, it looks more like medieval European, and it should be more Greek. And she had this idea of taking inspiration from like Greek theater masks, which I was like, I love it. That's great. And we, after some back and forth, we wound up with these guys, which I think have a very unique look. And I was like, yeah, I kind of wish there were even more in the movie. And the thing was, I figured we would only build 2 suits. And I was like, well, I can make it like look like we have 4 suits by, split screen, or like just, you have 2 when you're shooting one way, and then when you turn the camera around, you have the same 2 guys, but it looks like 2 different guys. But they actually built 4 suits, which was great. And then I could make it look like even more. So later on, you'll see 6 of them in the same shot, which was like, you shoot elements and do kind of split screen stuff.
Never say never.
It was great bringing Jaimin back. He's so great, and getting to sort of redesign his look, because in the first movie we had to sort of rush his wig and everything, and it turned out it looked a little goofy with that giant hair. So now we could do something more interesting, because like he's been in prison for years, and he can have a different look. Now Jaimin is like, he will always give 110%. So when he was like up against the prison bars here, like he was on his shoulder or something, because he was pushing against them so hard, like just giving it his all. That's what he's going to do.
Now we get to have our fun.
Fun is for children, dear. We are at war.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. No, don't be sorry. I'm sorry.
Totally my fault. Are you okay?
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
okay.
Actually, do you know where this is?
Miss Saunders. Yeah, absolutely. Is what I meant to say. Voice crack.
Oh, no worries. If it makes you feel any better, it's nothing compared to the amount that you're
Now this movie was shot in Atlanta, while the first movie was shot in Toronto. Neither place really looks like Philadelphia. But it was interesting trying to find places like the school here that looked similar enough to like the school in the first movie. Now, the establishing shot you saw, that was a plate of Philadelphia. And then they CGI'd in the school that's an actual school in Toronto into that plate. So there's a lot of tricks and things we had to do to make Atlanta feel like the Toronto version of Philadelphia.
What is this thing doing here?
Here's Diedrich Bader.
Shut up, man. What are you doing?
Come on.
Big fan of him. I've been ever since like Drew Carey Show and Office Space. And we wanted to have someone recognizable in the role of Gecko. So you think like, it's that guy. Of course he's going to be around. But then he dies. So, if you have someone you want to kill right away, if you can, get someone who people recognize or know, and then it'll hopefully give more of an impact.
So
now, Rachel Zegler, I was unfamiliar with when we cast her. So she had shot West Side Story, but it hadn't come out yet. And I sort of found out later that she was big on like YouTube and social media because of her singing. Like I was just totally unfamiliar with it. She just auditioned like everyone else, but she was fantastic. and we did like chemistry reads with her and Jack. But because of COVID and stuff, we had to do chemistry reads over Zoom, which seems a little weird, but it actually, like, even over Zoom, it just felt right. It just felt perfect. And that's how we knew, like, she's the one. And she's amazing. But, I think in every other movie she sings in, like West Side Story, and now she's in, like, Snow White and Hunger Games. So this is like the one movie where she doesn't get to sing, which might seem like a little bit of a wasted opportunity. It was fun bringing back the bullies here, the Briars. They were kind of surprised that, oh, you're bringing us back. One thing though is that we see them acting as bullies here, but they never get their comeuppance. I know someone in like test screenings pointed that out, like, hey, they get away with bullying. But I mean, that's kind of realistic, that happens. I love this. So that's a fake hand that I'm holding, and then Jaimin his left hand is pulling the splinter out. Coming up here this is like one of my favorite scenes. I just think it's so funny seeing Jaimin's head on like Wonder Woman's body. The thing was that, when we were talking about how to shoot this, the VFX guys were like, oh, this is going to be expensive. And they were talking about like all these sort of 3D CG solutions with like digi bodies and stuff like that. And I was like, no. Like I want it to be, or the thing is to me is like, it doesn't have to look perfect. It's actually more fun if it doesn't look perfect. Like it can look a little janky and a little out of sync. But the thing is that it actually turned out really good, I think, for what we did. We just shot it with a stand-in for Wonder Woman here, and then shot Jaimin in the same place, and Jaimin was wearing a wig and a tiara. And they, melded the two plates, and it worked really well. And I just think it's hilarious. I love Saxel chewing of his mint. It was funny, like trying to find a stand-in for Wonder Woman, because we were going to have Gal, the real Gal, later on, but we still had to shoot a lot of stuff with a double because she couldn't be there when we were shooting it. So, you have to find someone who fits into the suit. And we find, I think her name was Taylor, and she was a model who had never acted, like never been in front of a camera before.
Because of you.
But I think she did quite well. I mean, this works. And yeah,
hunting your family.
I think it looks great. Yeah, there's some little Easter eggs in here. You have the Annabelle Creation poster behind Billy, which is the second movie I did. And then there's a poster for my brother's video game, Iconoclasts. And there's a Conjuring poster in there, little things like that. And, references to other superheroes. Now, the whole, what do you call it, plasma globe thing, it had sort of a bigger meaning earlier on, or in earlier cuts of the movie. Here, it's sort of, the purpose it serves here is to show that it wasn't just a dream. Like the magic actually seeped out into his world and made the thing explode, like overcharge. And we used to have, that was sort of a plot point of, we actually established it earlier on in the movie, and then it was sort of a plot point of later on where he figures out like, oh, you can trap lightning inside of a ball, which is how he figures out how to defeat Calypso at the end. But it was kind of confusing, and we changed it because we focused instead of the staff about like overcharging the staff with lightning. Like the staff is like a battery for magic, which is the line we used later on. And it felt like that was a little clearer. Like you overcharge the staff, it turns into a bomb, and it can blow things up. Now, it was interesting trying to rebuild this cafeteria, because that's the one thing that sort of had to look very much like the cafeteria in the first movie. And I think they did a really good job. So we went to an actual school and put in like this fake wall behind them and like try to make it look as much as possible as in the first movie. Like there are differences, like the windows are different. There are things, but I mean, unless you compare it like side by side, if you saw the first movie like a year ago or a little while ago, and then you watch this, I think it's fine.
Wait, didn't you tell us the wizard disintegrated? The skin peeled off his face.
And this is outside the actual school.
Seems definitive. Yeah. Except now
Here we also had like not a deleted scene, but this scene where it was longer, where Jack was doing a lot of references to other superheroes and stuff, like talking about, the superheroes work alone. And but he was saying, that they all get together when there's a big world threatening event, but otherwise they work alone.
And it's a stupid rule, by the way. I have a girl talking to me, Billy. A girl for the first time in my life. And I probably don't have a shot in hell with this girl. But
there's always, a bunch of stuff you have to cut for pacing or whatever. Usually I'm okay, like I'm the kind of director who wants to make really short movies or as short as I can. So I'm really happy with like cutting stuff out. The shorter the better. There are some things I miss, but like for example, there was a scene of Mary. You can see that she's hungover here.
You have to talk so loud.
And there was an explanation to that. We saw her working with like a food delivery, like a Postmates, where she used her superpowers basically, she can fly to places, so she can deliver food really quickly. So there was a scene where she delivered food to a college, and she ran into people who she went to school with, and they were like, well, didn't you get into Oxford? And she's saying, well, I had to, take a year and be with family. And that sort of set up her issues, that she really wants to have a life beyond being a superhero. And Grace did a great job in the scene. I really liked the scene, but it was such an easy thing to cut out of the movie. And at first I was like, can we do that? Isn't it going to be weird that to have her just hung over without seeing why? But showing it to people who hadn't seen it with that scene in it, nobody reacted to it. So it was like, well, it's such an easy cut and it saves us a lot of time and gets the story going quicker. So it was worth doing it. The unfortunate thing was like, this is like in the first movie, I had to cut a scene with Mary as well that I really liked. There was a scene where the first night in the house, Billy tries to sneak out and she stops him and sort of tells him about her upbringing, how similar it was to his. So yeah, unfortunately, I keep cutting Mary stuff when Grace is so great. But I was glad we could give her more in this movie. I mean, in this movie, she plays both the young Mary and the old Mary, which was something we actually considered doing in the first one already. We didn't end up doing that, but it felt right for this movie because she's old enough now where she can definitely be both parts. And it was even something we played around with a little bit of her. We didn't end up in the movie, but we had these ideas of like that she was always trying to stay out of the like news reports and stuff like that because you can tell who it is. Like, so if the parents would see a news report, they would see that, well, that's Mary. So the Library of Eternity here, those first two shots with the flying books, that was not in the script. That was something in post where I was like, do we realize that these are books inside? Because we built two of these giant book towers The rest are CG, but the closest two are real. And we had these shots of the camera sort of sweeping across them, and I was like, people aren't going to understand that these are books. So I was like, what if we have flying books that come out of the bookshelves and fly around? And it's very sort of Harry Pottery, and it's kind of goofy, but it's like, why not? You know, we have a sentient pen here in Steve, so you know, why not? It adds a little something, makes it even more sort of magical, I guess. And Steve was really fun. First of all,
These are book titles.
designing him was a thing because it's like,
Where's Freddy?
yeah, he's a magical pen. That's what it says in the script. But it's like he needs to feel really old. You can't like just have a modern pen. So it's like, well, what do you do? Do you do like a quill or something? It needs to be a pen. So I had to do my research and look like what are the earliest pens like? And there's these like reef pens and stuff like that. And I was like, well, that looks ancient, but it's still a pen. So it was based on those kinds of pens, but a little bit more fancy. So this location, there's two places where we used one of these big LED screens that are like 270 degrees, kind of like, you know, it's a technique made famous with Mandalorian, you know, where you have a big LED walls and stuff. The first time we used it was in the museum in the beginning, outside the windows. Now, those are supposed to be windows, but to me, it doesn't quite look like windows. To me, it kind of looks like a big display. So officially, it's supposed to be windows, but in my head, it's kind of like, well, maybe it's a display the museum put up there. You know, they had way too much money and did just a giant LED wall because it can work both ways. Here, though, it's, we had this set surrounded by LED walls, but we had a lot of issues with it. First of all, we didn't do the full sort of 3D version that they did on Mandalorian. It was more of a 2D layered approach. So in a lot of these shots, in some of them, it's just the background is just fully replaced. In others, it's just sort of touch-ups to make it look better. But I do think that even if we wound up replacing a lot of it, the light is really nice, you know? And you can kind of see the difference because most shots are facing this way, where we had the screen.
How did you two?
And the light looks really nice. When you look the other way, it was blue screen. And you can kind of tell, I think. But I'm not sure. It's like, it almost looks too perfect. The reason we did it this way is because we wanted the sun to be setting. And if you shoot in a real sunset, you have like 20 minutes to shoot. But with one of these LED walls, you can have sunset for as long as you want.
He crafted a quarterstaff from the Tree of Life, and he used
But it is kind of hard to make it look really realistic, where it doesn't look too heightened. But we got our eternal sunset.
battery for magic. But when things got bad, a council of human wizards got together.
It's shooting stuff like this. It's interesting because you shoot the whole scene with everyone, all the wide shots and all the close-ups, and then at the very end, you shoot all these inserts of the hands, like pointing at things, like, oh, what does this say? And like all the illustrations, and then you kind of have to rush that because you do that last, but it is important. You have to get it. Originally here, we had a thing where Shazam, he sees this and he actually says Shazam out loud, which turns him into Billy because he didn't realize that he was saying Shazam. And then he turns back. But that was one thing where it's like, we can save a lot of time if we don't do that. So we found a take, where he said this and we could sort of cut around it. But yeah, we did have Asher in there and tried shooting it that way.
It's pronounced Solomon.
Oh.
What else have we learned, fam?
Well, once the staff contained the powers of the gods, the wizards apparently.
I like these old books. I like old illustrations like this, and that's that turned into our credit sequence. We got the same illustrator that did most of these to do that. And here's Wolf Blitzer.
Two women dressed in what
Whoa,
appears to be
that's the wizard.
No, because it felt like that post-credit scene felt similar to the post-credit scene in the first movie where it was all Freddy's illustrations. So this was like Steve's illustrations instead. Now here we get a flashback to a moment in the first movie, but if you're paying attention, you might see that we reshot it. And that I was very adamant. I really wanted to reshoot it rather than use the footage of them in the first movie. The reason being that we changed the suits so much that I figured it'll be jarring if you cut back to the suits from the first movie to this. Because, I mean, if you've seen the first movie and it's been a while and then you see this movie, it's like, yeah, that's what Shazam looks like. But when you see them side by side, it's a huge difference. And not just in suit, but in like hair and stuff like that. You know, he had bigger, blacker hair in the first movie. And of course, you know, Grace is now playing adult Mary. So I insisted that we reshoot it rather than use the footage from the first one. But we found the background plate from the first one, so we only needed some hay on the floor and little stuff like that, and in front of a blue screen, and they could all make it work. And it looks like in the first movie, just with different suits.
Whoa. Look who you're with. What could possibly be dangerous?
Us.
Then we have a little bit of a different sky. It's a little later now, so we had like two different skies for these screens back here.
Freddy?
Ow!
Freddy, I didn't know. I never meant for you to get hurt.
Oh, I'm not the one who's gonna get hurt. Shazam!
Yeah, I love that his voice breaks a little bit right there. Yeah. And poor Diedrich here, poor Mr. Geckel.
Are you? Do you have kids here?
What are you doing? Don't hurt him.
I won't.
I love his little line. Do you have kids here? I think that he improvised that. He did a lot of like ad-libbing. Unfortunately, not a lot of it ended up in the movie because there was originally a little bit more with Geckel because he was even in the cafeteria when Freddy is showing Anthea where he was sitting. This was funny. Like, there's a shot here when he drops down, like this shot. I took inspiration from Magnolia. You know, there's a scene in the early on in that movie where a guy jumps off a rooftop, and I was telling our stunts coordinator Chris O'Hara, like I showed him like that reference, and he was like, "Yeah, that's me." So he was actually the guy in Magnolia jumping off the rooftop.
No need.
That's what I love about this job, that I get to work with people who have worked and made, you know, all these movies that I love, you know, and some old school ones like old John Carpenter movies and Sam Raimi movies. And I get to hear like stories about how the movies were made. And it's great. Yeah, the whole power of Axis with Anthea here was something that, you know, was hard to figure out because it rearranges the city, and it was sort of in here you can see a little sign down at the bottom right there that says Diodato Inn, which is a little hidden reference to the Italian filmmaker Ruggero Diodato.
There are more.
There's a few Italian horror movie reference in here, like in the pediatrician's office. His name is Dr. Dario Bava, which is like a combination of Dario Argento and Mario Bava. And then there's the Diodato reference, and later on there's a Lucio Fulci reference as well. I'm just really into old Italian horror filmmakers.
We do this our way, not theirs.
But yeah, the axis of power, you know, it looked weird when we tried to just have buildings sliding around. Like, you had to have a little bit more to it. But it was also like kind of similar to, like, you didn't want to like rip off Doctor Strange, where they have this sort of recursion sort of happening. So yeah, it was quite a challenge to design something that wasn't exactly like Doctor Strange, but also sort of rearranged the city in a way. Yeah, we call this the pizza, the flying pizza or something. because we built that like a practical little set they could stand on and fly around on.
Billy, no!
Yeah, originally we had some extra stuff here as well when that showed more the dome being created. This is a shot this one, where it sort of comes through the bridge, camera goes up, and then we find Shazam going after the sisters. That was a previous shot that Third Floor came up with that I just loved right away. I mean, oftentimes there's a lot of back and forth and notes of like, no, that's not what I have in mind, try this instead. Sometimes I have to like do my own little things in Blender or draw little storyboards or something to show exactly what I need. But that one, just straight out of the box, like, I love it. Don't change anything. And it stayed the same the whole time. In shots like this, you have Sack in a rig, like a tuning fork rig is what it's called, where he's sort of floating a bit above the ground. But then you end up replacing most of his body anyway. So in these shots, it's basically just his head that's real, like hands and everything is CG. Because, even if you just paint out the rig and then fill things in, you can always tell that there's a rig, that he's attached to something. Now here's a real plate, a real city, and here's fully CG city. So yeah, that was tricky to sort of match, but it was like, well, we had the reference of the first city, so I was just try and make it look as that like that first shot as much as possible. And that's one thing when you're doing CG cities at night, they often turn out a little too bright, like you see too much. Like if you look at actual footage shot at night, especially with like Alexa cameras and stuff, you don't see much detail. It's oftentimes just like a sea of black with just little lights.
To sleep. It is the only escape from the tortures here.
Now, when we were looking at the window there, you saw in the mid-ground, you saw a couple of guards dragging people into a door. So I was like, we had that shot where the camera came out and saw like, oh, this big space. And I was like, I want to have some movement in there. So to make it look a little less like a static, matte painting. And I was like, can we put some of the soldiers in there or like the minions in there? And we didn't have scanned versions. Like we didn't have 3D models of them. So what they did was they took footage from elsewhere in the movie of the minions dragging Freddy and the wizard.
Let's just get out of here.
So if you look really closely, I mean, we kept it really dark and they're really small, but that's Freddy and the wizard being dragged by the minions. But yeah, it's just nice to have a little movement in there.
Sisters are keeping us in here.
And yeah, now we're into Freddy and the wizard, which I think is a really fun dynamic, like having the wizard be the straight man and Jack being the comedic one. Because, I mean, in the first one, we had Jack and we're Freddy and Shazam, which is a great pairing. But it was really fun in this movie to switch it up and have Freddy and the wizard go on adventures together.
It's Freddy, by the way. Freebie.
And here too was it was a lot of stuff we trimmed and cut because it was great, but it was just really long. Now that tooth bit, for example, that's not in the script. That was Jack. Like, when they decorated this set, they actually put little teeth on the ground. And so when Jack sat down, he actually saw that, oh, there's a tooth on the ground, and he picked it up and he said that. And, I loved it. That was so great about Jack. He'll come up with a lot of stuff like that. But yeah, we cut a lot of stuff. Like Freddy was going like, when he was so disappointed in the wizard, he was like, so wizard, is that like an ironic nickname? Like when you call a big guy tiny? And yeah, they had a lot of banter, which was really fun, but like you have to keep the story moving. And here we see how they decorated even the seats,
Also sucks at dodgeball.
Fine, listen.
And it's fun that we could have, you see Darla there. There's a Funko pop of Darla in there. That's the fun thing about doing a sequel. Like, we had all these toys from the first movie. And since in this world, we're like, superheroes exist. And of course, they would have Funko Pops and things like that. Now, you can see Shazam here playing around with what will turn out to be the golden apple. This was something where I was like, I wish we could have sort of established it better. That because it's sort of the only thing we did was him playing around with it here. But it's like, well, we have to show, like, we had it in here from the start. As soon as we saw this place, the apple is right there. But it's like, people aren't going to notice that unless we make a thing out of it. So it's like, at least play around with the apple. So maybe people will notice it, so it doesn't seem out of nowhere when we later find out that, that's what the sisters were after. And of course, here we do a real thing of like, look at the apple. Now, this set, I think, turned out really cool. Of course, a lot of it is CG. What we did was we built this set up to a certain height. So you can see the Atlas statue back there. So we built the set up to about his knees. So all the statues, all the columns, the doors, everything, it just stopped sort of at that height. And then we continued it with CG. But it looks great. I think the set extensions here came back pretty much looking like this, and I was like, I have no notes. It looks great. I think that's because it's sort of halfway real, so they have things to match to. It's always so much better to have reference than when it's all CG, which sometimes you just have to do. But yeah, in this scene as well, I think you'll see, especially when the bird comes in, you see that there are 6 of these guards. So we shot, we only had 4, but we made them look like we had a little bit more. I wish I could have kept one of these thrones. There's so much cool, set pieces and stuff in this movie. Here's the flying bird, and you can see that there's 6 of the guards in there. As soon as she grabs it here, it becomes real. I love this gag about, Steve just writing everything down and Helen reading it out, just totally deadpan. The thing was, though, that when we were in post-production on this movie, I was watching the TV show Barry. It's a great show on HBO. And they have a gag that's very similar to this, where he's in a store and he's sort of dictating a message on his phone. And then the person he sends it to is reading it out loud. And you have this whole conversation between Barry and someone at the store. And I was like, oh, damn it. We had already shot, movie was wrapped. But it's like, our movie doesn't come out until a few months more, so people might think we ripped off Barry, which we didn't do. But they're kind of different enough. And I mean, we have Helen Mirren, so
Sister,
hey.
We need not torture him any longer. You heard the letter.
Throw them in the pit.
Oh, wait.
This is improvised as well. When she lets him go, that was Jack just doing that thing of hitting his head on the ground, and it looks so painful.
It's just a bad name.
Like, Jack is another actor who would just go for it, Now we're getting into the pit here. So we had some trouble with this set because when you're like these rocks here that he's interacting with, they're all CG. They're all put in afterwards, and this fog on the ground and everything. So, I mean, when you're shooting a movie like this, you have so many sets to build, but you only have so much studio space. So you kind of have to you build one set, and then, you tear that down as you're building the next set, and then you're building another set at the same time. So some of these sets you don't really get to see before you're about to shoot them. And for some reason, I'm not sure what happened here. But the rocks that we had when we were shooting did not look great. And I think partly also this set was so stuff like this had to be shot without smoke. And that has to be added. So, but they made it look pretty cool in post. And the dragon here, I love because it's it was really made to be in darkness with this whole glowing inside. And I kind of wanted to have the whole third act or the whole latter half of the movie to be at night, to when the monsters take over the city. We didn't have that problem on the first movie because one, we were shooting in the winter, so it got dark really fast, and we were shooting in Canada, in Toronto. So we could make it work there, but not on this one.
Which does make
But, it makes it different. You don't see a lot of scenes like that during the day in a lot of movies. But the dragon was really made to be shown in the dark. Now, when you look back there behind Anthea,
was the seed.
that's, if you go back there and then to the left, that's the prison cell where we first saw the wizard. Because we built this, little area that we reused a lot to make it seem like, that there's a bit of a labyrinth in there, there are prison cells and things. So they'll walk over the same spots a lot in this movie. We just changed, like we took out a wall here and like we changed the doorway to make it look a little different. But it's all just a little bit of set. Now, this area here, we completely took over. Like all these storefronts and everything is stuff that we put in and dressed. Because some of these stores weren't actually anything there. They were just empty. And this was like a pizza place, I think, that we made into a cheesesteak place. And, there's a few references in there that you can't really see, like Herkimer's fish market back there. Like Herkimer is one of the crocodile guys from Shazam. In the first movie, you see 3 of the crocodile men, and Herkimer is one of them. But they did misspell it, so I think it says Hermiker, but you don't really see it anyway. But it's in there, and we actually took over the whole street behind them, much more than you actually see in the movie. So there were other references to old Shazam comics in there that, unfortunately, you don't get to see. But I know they're there. This scene was a lot of fun to shoot. It just seems so silly with them sitting, eating cheesesteaks, her with her full armor and him in his suit and everything. And
you are very...
And, Helen is so great. She's such a delight to work with as well. She's the most pleasant person ever, and she's like, she'll hang around on set and just talk to people, and she wants to do her own stunts. In the scene coming up that's underground, she did a lot of stuff herself, but some of them we were like, no, we can't let you do that, even if you want to do it. The thing was here that we had like 2 days to shoot this and the fight, and like the first day was just sort of this dialogue scene. So then we only had 1 day to shoot a fight here, and half of that day rained away because in Atlanta during the summer there's so much rain and lightning and thunder, so we lost so much time. So this sort of fighting up here, we had to hurry so much. Like we didn't have time to do it like properly. We had to do like shoot with 3 cameras at once and just try to capture as much as we could. Originally, there Shazam just went into some bags of concrete or like bags of cement or whatever it is. But it looked too perfect. It looked like he landed just on those bags, and they looked kind of soft because they were. So they were replaced with those bricks or whatever you call it in post. Now here, when they go down underground, that was added later. Because the thing was, we had to hurry so much with the scene up top that it didn't feel like a proper like fight scene. So it was something we felt like, well, we have to add something here. And we couldn't go back to that same location because, like I said, we took over that whole street and like all those storefronts, and there was a lot of things done. So we were like, well, how can we add something to the scene without going back to the same location? So we came up with this thing of like, well, what if they go through the ground into this underground like storage? I don't know why this cheesesteak place have this much storage underground. But that solved that problem of like, okay, then we can go down here, have a fight scene, and then they can jump up, and then we're back into the original footage.
Sure, I didn't see that coming because she didn't go to the eye doctor.
This sort of the stunts down here were designed by Scott Rogers, who came in just for this and figured out a lot of the action here. Now, one thing here, though, they are in a dark environment, but their bolts aren't lit up. That would have been sort of too much to do because this was sort of added later, and it's like, well, we don't have a lot of time and stuff. So, but I figured it's still daytime. It's just that they're underground, so it still makes sort of sense with the rules, And here, this is Helen, doing that. So we have. That's not Zach doing the actual ping-ponging, and that's a stunt guy, but it was Helen holding on to him. And, when Zach was holding up Helen above his head, that's Helen. She's on wires, and that's why we did that shot from above looking down, because we wanted to show that, look, it's really her. And here, this is Helen holding up Zach. And this little shot here, when she fixes her crown, that was an accident. Like, when she pushed him down into the ground, he hit her crown, so it slid down a little bit, and she just did that sort of in-character thing of just pushing it up a little bit, and I love that moment so much. So that shot was actually, it was like a B camera, and the shot was slightly out of focus, but I just love the moment so much that I put it in there.
Nope.
And this whole scene was shot in order.
Okay. That was fine.
Which meant that we kind of had to hurry a little bit with that ball of debris at the end. Now, when we come up here, you see that Eugene was facing here. So she comes out and her face is kind of burnt, but she heals. That's because since we went down underground and had this whole fight, it's like, well, what happened to Calypso up top? Like she got thrown into that little building. But why didn't she just come out sooner and start fighting Eugene, who was just standing there? So my explanation for that was like, well, let's add some wounds to her face. So we show that, you know, as she got shot and flew into that building, she was really hurt. She was like taken out of it for a bit. But the sisters have healing powers or something. So that's why she comes out a little later and heals.
You do, yeah. But, you know, look, Pedro, we all have our weak spots. You know what I mean? And hers, lack of strategic thinking.
Now this part of the set is just,
and the staff.
You know, when you're in the Rock of Eternity and you look towards the flaming violin that we do at one point earlier, that's just this little area. You know, you try to make everything as compact as possible to not build, you know, unnecessary sets and be able to reuse things. And this was one of those things.
Dear daughters of ass hatless, burn! I just came up with that. Make sure you put a dash in there, though, so it's really clear. Okay. Man, it's so good having Steve cover grammar and spelling and stuff. It makes me sound so much smarter.
Now, the funny thing was, Steve, he was loved by, like, test audience and stuff. Like, he never says anything. He's just a pen floating around, but people just love Steve for some reason.
Slightly upsetting, I'm not going to lie.
And Darla loves Skittles. You know, when you have stuff like that, like a whole bowl of just yellow Skittles, I mean, the only way to do that is to actually sit there and pick out all the yellow Skittles. So that's what the prop guys had to do. They had bags and bags and bags of Skittles, and they had to divide them up like that.
I thought we brought her in too easily.
So that lock there, that was a prop made like that. But then you add a little bit of glow afterwards. So we had like a melted prop lock with a little bit of CGI on top of it.
Well, this seemed inevitable.
So the room of doors, this is the same, you know, they come in through the same way that Shazam came in earlier when he went and got Eugene. But I wanted it to look much bigger this time. So we pretend that it's a different place, a different area they come into with more doors. And now the place where they're standing right now, this is the prison cell where the wizard was earlier. But we've taken the wall out back there. We put this door in there, taken the bars out, and just to make it look like a different area. So now they're walking out of the prison cell. Now there's one shot coming up here when they're running towards the camera. That's not Jack. So right there, that's a double. So what happened was we had a Jack double like the whole time, like in case we needed him. But the only time we actually needed him was there. And the reason was, you know, it's hard scheduling these things. And we were just ready to go early, but Jack wasn't scheduled to come in until later. So rather than just sit and wait around, which you can't really do on a movie set, you have to keep going. We were like, well, let's use the double for this shot. Even though they're running straight towards camera, I think it really holds up. Like it's quick enough and it's sort of in the dark a little bit that it looks like Jack, but it's not.
Gosh. Where are you going now?
This was one of those shots where it's like, you know, we're running low on time, don't have time for coverage. Let's just do it all as a oneer. And it works. We did this a few times, and on one of them, Megan came out, or we did one version where she comes out, instead of just saying, nope, she's not in there, she came out and she was like, yep, everyone in there's dead, which was kind of funny, but it didn't feel right. So we didn't use it, but it made me laugh on the day. Now the apple they have here is like, a plastic apple that we painted gold, but it turned out a little bit more bronze. So we actually, in a lot of these scenes, they had to go in and with visual effects, make it more gold.
Just as they destroyed ours.
And now, and this scene is a little bit interesting because we change some things here. Originally, in this argument, I mean, the fun thing about this scene is Jack sneaking in. He does that great. But in this argument between the sisters, originally Hespera was on Calypso's side. She was all on board with taking the apple to the human world and basically destroying it. But we had problems sort of with the motivations of the sisters, and it was a little bit confusing. So we decided that, well, it would be better to have Hespera not be that evil, because she has a change of heart later on and becomes good. So, and it was a bigger, leap to have her be on board with Calypso's plan and then change her mind about it. So some of these shots in here were reshot just to change what was said, but we didn't reshoot anything with Rachel. So her reactions are all to the old dialogue. But, a lot of it is off screen as well. And I think it works. And I think a lot of people probably don't even think too much about what they're saying because we're focusing on Jack sneaking around.
I want you to take the apple and plant.
Jack is so fun. I love his little going from the apple. Now, that scene, right before he took up the apple, Helen's lines were ADR. So if you pay attention to it, her mouth movements don't match because that was sort of from the first version of the scene. And we just changed the dialogue, but she's slightly out of focus, and you're more focused on Jack, so we get away with it.
Question, no idea. What made you look?
The old flaming violin. That's a prop that's made of metal, so it can be on fire for as long as you want. Just do not touch that thing after they take it out because it's very, very hot.
So we have a lot to talk about.
The staging and blocking a movie with these many characters can be an issue, especially later on when you have the whole family and you have Rosa and Victor, and it's just like, and you have the sisters, and it's like you have 11 characters to figure out where they stand and how they move, and it is quite a challenge. It's not the same as when you're shooting a movie and it's just like 2 people in a house or 2 people talking or maybe 3 people or something. But yeah, 11 people, it's not recommended. It gets tricky. I love Pedro's little look there. This was a scene that I thought about cutting because I figured we could just go from the dragon symbol activating to Victor snoring. But the editor, Michelle, she talked me out of it. She's like, it's going to be too much of a leap. Like, what happened in between? Like, we need to see some sort of connection of them going to the Rock of Eternity and then coming out. And this is a room that we never saw in the first movie, so it was something. Victor and Rosa's room is something built just for this, and I'm not really sure if the geography makes sense of like where things are. It seems to be a lot of room and a lot of space in this house.
We're superheroes.
I'm gay.
Yeah, we know, bud.
Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something we started setting up in the first movie because Jeff Johns, who co-created the character of Pedro, he was always, saying that Pedro is gay. So we hinted to it in the first movie, when they come out of the strip club, and he's like, "Oh, it's not really my thing." But now it felt time to just come out and say it, And it was fun to do this kind of thing of like, well, it's not a big deal because they all know, they don't care, and that's it, So that's the house from the first movie, which is a house in Toronto. So we sent a team there. The VFX team, actually, I think, went and just shot some plates of the house because we never have any characters there. It's just, it's just a house getting broken. This scrapyard was a cool place we found.
I know this is a lot to take in, but
I think in the script originally it was just like a parking lot in the city or something. But then we found this and it's like, well, this is great. Bunch of broken cars and dragon can break more cars. And the cool thing here was when the dragon steps on the caravan. So they actually built a caravan that could implode, that it sort of got sucked into itself. So when we shot it, it looked like an invisible dragon was stepping on it. And then the dragon was added on top of that.
Again? Freddy!
No. You're coming up here. We originally had, when he takes the apple and he's like, oh, this is what you want, right? And then he actually started eating the apple, which made me laugh. Because it's just such a... I think I remember when we got that draft of the script, when Henry Gayden had added that he started eating the apple, and I thought it was such an out of nowhere thing, because you don't expect it, like a golden apple, but he just started eating it really quickly. And then Calypso started shooting at him to get him to stop eating, and then for the rest of the movie, I mean, it's not on screen for that much long after that, but for the rest of the movie, it was a half-eaten apple. So, in shots like this. But then in the edit, when we're trying to make the movie shorter and taking out some stuff that were a little bit too goofy, we decided to, let's not have him eat the apple. But that meant going into all these shots and changing it to a non-eaten apple. Stuff like this is so hard to shoot and make look good. Like you have Grace in a rig and you blow a lot of air on her, but you try to keep those shots pretty short because and you try to shake the camera as much as possible, because if you focus on it too much, you can feel that it's blue screen. This is real though. They're on wires, they're coming down, and I think you feel it when it's real.
Where is this dragon?
Now, I love that they made the flags get caught in the wind by the dragon there. I also love this score by Chris Beck. Like the dragon theme, I just love, and the sisters theme. Like I've been humming that a lot because it gets stuck in your head. Now here, the only thing we had here was a piece of grass for her to walk on. We couldn't shoot in an actual stadium like this, and certainly couldn't destroy an actual stadium. We did go look at an actual baseball stadium in Atlanta just to see what it's like. Like I'd never been to a baseball stadium before, and it was good for me just to get a feel of like what it feels like and what it looks like. But then, of course, they took a lot of reference photos and shot some stuff of the this actual stadium in Philadelphia. I had a lot of references from like Tremors and stuff like that to try to explain like the roots traveling underground like this. And I like how this turned out, like all the seats going flying, and seeing the big parking lot here, seeing it all head towards the city. This intersection here was second unit director Brian Smurs did a lot of this, and I love that he did. You see those two cars there smacking into each other, crashing into each other up in the air. That's practical. Those are real cars that they threw up in the air and into each other. Now this is first unit. I shot this. So it's like it goes a little back and forth in the sequence between second unit and first unit, because a lot of times, if you don't have any of the main actors, you give it to second unit. But some of this I really wanted to shoot and get it just the way I wanted, And here's one of the shots that's actually from Philadelphia, drone shot. But they put in the stadium a little bit more visible back there. Really happy with how the roots and the pods turned out here. Like it looks like they're there. I mean, on the day we just had a bunch of tubes and like big beanbag sacks to stand in for roots and pods. So this is first unit because I wanted to do this thing with the big stinger coming out. Now this woman here, we shot the thing where she was chased that we saw by the roots that we saw earlier, and she goes up against the car. And I thought she was so great. We were going to shoot this later in the day, and I figured I would just pick an extra to do that. But I just loved how good she was in that first shot. So I was just, hey, I want you to be in this next scene as well. And we got to follow her a little bit more. And right here, that's me getting picked up. And speaking a little Swedish, what I'm saying is, let me go. And yeah, I got to have, suit up in a harness and go flying on wires and did lots and lots of takes because I wanted to get it right. And it was a lot of fun. But yeah, I was pretty bruised after that. And then I got to go and get scanned and become a digi-double. I love the reveal of the Minotaur that we saw there, and then that shot where we see there's a lot going on there. But yeah, the reveal of the Minotaur and the Cyclops. The Cyclops is the design of them are a reference to like the Ray Harryhausen Cyclops. I just love monsters, and it was fun to do sort of these varied monsters with in this one. In the first movie we had the Seven Deadly Sins, but they had to feel much like a unit. So they have different designs, but they're sort of the same color and they're sort of in the same family. And here it felt like, harpies didn't have to look like minotaurs, and manticore is certainly different from a minotaur. And you got the dragon, and yeah, that's fun.
You look great.
So this location is very Atlanta. We're on top of a parking garage, but you can see all those like tall buildings around it with those narrow windows. There's no place like that in Philadelphia, but I really liked the location a lot. Like it was perfect for what we wanted to do, and they could look out and see the stadium and everything. And to me, it's like, I mean, I've only been to Philadelphia and these places because of these movies. I'm from Sweden originally. And I wouldn't have known. I mean, most people won't know. Yeah, people in Philadelphia or Atlanta will go like, that's Atlanta. But, it works.
And you were right. You picked the wrong champion, man.
Now this, it was extremely hot up here. You can even see it sort of in the background of sometimes of Jack like leaning on his crutch because like we're up top on this parking garage. There's no getting away from the sun, and it is so hot, really sweaty, and like, and poor Jaimin, with the big wig and everything. We had to do some wig fixes in some shots because it's like, yeah, it gets sweaty and it sort of got almost, there's like a mesh that sort of lets go from the skin sometimes. And you also have to do suit fixes in these movies because, you want your superheroes to look as if they came off the pages of a comic book. And, sometimes real suits, they wrinkle and they do weird things, and you have to go in there and do little fixes and tweaks to make it look perfect.
I'm going to go get that staff.
This was a tricky scene as well because it's three scenes in one. You have, Freddy and Anthea, her saying goodbye. Then you have this whole moment with the wizard sort of telling Shazam, that he's the right choice and everything. And then you have this scene with Billy and Rosa. All good scenes, but it's like three scenes right after another and in the same location. So we tried to compress things as much as possible. So it's not like, 10 minutes of being on a rooftop. I think they work, and I think, this part is pretty emotional. Marta, who plays Rosa, she's great in emotional scenes. Like she in the first one as well. Like she she makes it look easy, which I'm sure it's not. But no, she's great with this stuff.
Now do me a favor, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Go kick their ass. Okay?
A tricky thing was all these transformations. I wish we had time to shoot some actual smoke there as a reference, because whenever you do these smoke things in daytime, I never think they turn out quite right. But it's like, I don't know if it isn't right because I have no reference. Originally here we had a very long scene where they were gonna drive out of there, but he has to do like a 10-point turn to get out of the garage, and then when he finally gets going, when he drives into the garage, the van is so high that the little thing on top, the little vent thing, gets knocked off, and he runs out and gets it. And it was funny in that sort of kind of Family Guy way of something just going on for way too long, until it gets funny. But again, that was an easy cut to make when you're trying to keep the runtime down. But I know, like, Henry Gayden, the writer, he liked it a lot because it wasn't in the script; it was something improvised on the day. So he loved it, but it was like we can't keep it in there. You see a little bit of a Fulci reference back there. This building is called Fulci Plaza. And that was cool. Helen Mirren was on a rig to get her up there. And it was kind of inspired by, like, Aliens, with Bishop getting impaled. I liked how this turned out, her getting away by rearranging the whole city. Now, this location right here, if you look down the street there, right down the street there is where Shazam will then fight Calypso and the dragon. Again, and if you go down to the right, behind this building, that's where they first encounter the unicorns. So, you try to find locations where you can shoot a lot of different stuff, so you don't have to travel all over, because when it's this close, you can just move between shots or between scenes and save a lot of time. Now, those buildings behind there are added because I just didn't think the harpies looked right when it was just in front of a blank sky, like a white sky. I love this detail of him trying to grab hold of the windshield wiper.
There are only so many Minotaurs I could run over with this.
No, but the skies are a big problem because when you have people flying and, whenever you do blue screen things or put things in and it's just a sky behind them, it never looks quite real. It's really hard to make it look good. It's better when you have a more detailed background. The best is when you have a detailed background, you have kind of a long lens and it's more of a close-up on someone, so it's a little out of focus back there. That's when you can make it look really real. Now, the fire here being shot at a car, the way we did it was we had one of our prop guys had a flamethrower, and he used that flamethrower on a real car. And then, in post, you put in a Minotaur. I love the little things. So the monsters are made by Weta. And I love the little things, the little details they have in the background there with the guy jumping out the window, and like you can see little interactions between monsters and humans, and it's great. I mean, here we have actual people, like, you saw the Cyclops there knocking over a tent, so that's a really tall guy we had on set. We had a couple of really tall guys to stand in for, like, Minotaurs and Cyclops causing havoc, and then they get replaced.
Hey, Khaleesi!
So this was funny because, we were talking about how Shazam was gonna, encounter the dragon here.
Really satisfying.
And we were sort of figuring out some of this stuff in post-production because, a lot of it is animation anyway, so you can do almost anything you want. And I was saying in a VFX meeting, that well, how about like I want Shazam to fly into the dragon and knock him into a building, just like he just hits the building. And the VFX producer Kevin was like, "Well, why don't you have him go through the building?" And I was like, "Well, that's great," which I found hilarious that the VFX producer, the guy who's like in charge of money and trying to not spend too money, he was the one going like, "Wait, have him go through the building." It's like, okay. But it's a good idea. It worked quite well. Now there was a cameo there by the original Billy Batson from the old 70s Shazam show. And he's even wearing the same kind of shirt that he had back in the day. And there's also the woman back there, Bonnie, is a friend of my wife who came to visit. Had to put her in the movie, of course. Yeah, blew up a lot of cars here. It was actually originally even more cars being blown up, which is a lot of fun. Like, we destroyed so many cars in this movie. I mean, that's the fun stuff about doing superhero movies, the resources, getting to throw cars up into the air, drop them from the sky and blow them up and crush them. And yeah, but I mean, we cut some of it out because it's almost like too much. You kind of almost get tired of car destruction after a while. Trying to keep it tight. Yeah, so here's where so this line was added.
Like a battery.
It's a little clunky perhaps, but we needed to really get through what hint to what his plan was. And what we originally had was more just him seeing light bouncing around in there, that reminded him of the plasma globe from earlier. But it just wasn't clear enough. We needed to have something that was clearer and more, quicker. This alley, I've seen pop up in some other movies. I was rewatching Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. The Nice Guys recently. And I saw they were parked outside this very garage opening in one of the scenes.
It's okay. Come here.
It was really fun designing like a cool unicorn, because we wanted something that's, well, this isn't the same thing that you've seen before. This isn't the happy, nice rainbow unicorn. This is a badass unicorn that kills monsters.
What's up? Darla!
Now, of course, we have Skittles here, and they allowed us to use it. And to me, I like when you have actual products. Like, it just makes it feel more real. I mean, some people go like, oh, it's product placement, or like they think it's kind of cheesy. But to me, it's like it's more weird to me when you have like made up products that sort of stand out more.
We have.
And the Taste the Rainbow always gets a laugh whenever people see it. I think the unicorn turned out really good in this scene. The visual effects here are by D-Neg. We had a unicorn head on the day that was sort of on a stand that we could use as like a lighting reference and for her to pet.
Good girl.
And I think that really helps with as a reference to see like, well, this is what it would actually look like, and they can match to that. So on the day, that was me with like a painter's pole with a spatula on the end of it for eye line. And I would like scream at the actors, like roar, and to make them react and show them where to look. So there, that's a tall guy holding her up, or I mean, she's on wires, but this is all shot with like a big tall guy as a reference, and then he gets taken out and monster gets put in. This is like a combination of first and second unit. Like, this is from here, it's all first unit, and I mean, some of this is like full CG. Like, it was fun. they're sitting on these saddles that are sort of motorized to get the movement right, but it looks so silly whenever people are sitting on. It's like a saddle, and then in front of them they have a little bit of hair to hold on to, and yeah, it looks super silly.
Come on. Powers. Medical powers. No, how to fix dead people powers. Clear? Oh, come on!
That was interesting. The wound on her there. Whenever you see it, that's computer generated. We never built a suit with a hole in it.
We can save them.
Because that was something as well that we could figure out in post just what it would look like, how big that the tail stinger would actually be. But it looks great. Like, it looks like we had a suit with that in it.
Is that enough to kill the dragon?
And then we have, of course, the burnt suit of Shazam.
Everything that's inside.
Which was kind of an ordeal to figure out as well, because you don't want it to look gruesome, and you don't want it to look... You don't want to see skin underneath. You don't want it to be open, so it turns into more of a melted plastic kind of look. This is one of my favorite scenes. I like shooting it. It was cool. I mean, this is the most extras I've ever used in a film. There's a guy in there who looks like Hammond from the Jurassic Park, or the guy who has Jurassic Park with the hat. The reason why it's shot in a parking garage like this is that we needed to... Well, first of all, it would look cooler because I wanted to have the dragon in the dark as much as possible, so we could see some of the way he glows. But it also works a little bit, I hope, to bridge going from day to night, because the final fight in the stadium had to be at night because of all the lightning and just to make it look the way I wanted to. But we have to go from day to night really quickly. And I figured that at least this thing is sort of a little darker because it's inside. I mean, you can see that there's full-on sunshine out there, but hopefully it helps a little bit with the transition of it's getting a little later in the day. And that's the thing where, the scene much earlier when they run into the room of the parents before the house gets destroyed, they're in bed and it's in the middle of the day. And that's because in the original script, that's when it was night. They came in during the night, and this all happened during the night. But we had to change it, So it's a little weird that they're sleeping, but, they're having an afternoon nap or something. Now, for Jack here to be able to lean forward like this and really have to struggle, he was strapped to a sled, or just a sled of just weights, so he could lean forward. And he really had to struggle to get forward. There are a couple of shots where we didn't use the sled, and he was really good at just miming that, leaning forward in that way. And I had this idea here to make their eyes blue when they're affected by the fear effect, because I want to make sure that it's clear. I'm not sure if it's totally clear still. I hope so. But just to show that whenever you're affected by the fear effect, we have, the eyes turn blue. That means that you can't really move. And then you have, all the distortion happening. And I mean, the idea is that the fear effect can only be used against mortals, which is why it's not used against Shazam. I mean, that's something that Rachel's character says earlier, that it paralyzes mortals, to try to, have some rules that make sense. Yeah, so here we can see now we go to night very quickly. We had actually a little scene in there between this and the next shot where we saw the kids rounding up monsters in the park. But we'll see that, the park later on. But yeah, it turns to night very quickly here because we had to. But you gotta have that final showdown at night. It's not gonna work.
Now, Sparrow.
Now.
This dragon was fun to design, just to have like a wooden dragon. Now, the thing is, like in mythology, Layton has like 100 heads. And I did, for at least a moment early on, like, is there a version to do a dragon with 100 heads? And it's like, well, it can't be like 100 full-size heads. It would, so I was thinking like, oh, if there's a lot of small heads that almost create a big head, or maybe there's a main head and a lot of extra little heads, but it's just like, no, it's just going to be weird and silly. So we went with just one head, but he is made of wood, which is kind of unique, and he has the fear effect. And so, you try to do it. I mean, dragon has been, you've seen a lot of dragons, with Game of Thrones and The Hobbit and all these things. So you try to create your own version of it that's a little bit different.
No.
A lot of things you have to figure out how to show. Like the dome shrinking is like, well, as it's shrinking, it has to go through things. But when it's not shrinking, it has to contain people so they can't leave or can't go in there. So you have to just try to figure out, my solution was to have that little ripple effect sort of in it, that whenever it sort of unlocks with that going one way. And we add a little sound to that. And then when it settles, it locks again, like going the ripple or whatever you call it, that lighter part sort of goes the other way. And hopefully that sells the idea. I love these shots. I mean, see, this is why it needs to be at night. Seeing that blue dragon fire and stuff. This angle, looking down at the parking lot, was one that we didn't get a plate for on the day. I didn't have time for it or something. Like, this is real. This is an actual parking lot, of course. We didn't have that angle, though. And VFX were like, they were trying to talk me into just skipping that shot because it would be such an ordeal to create from scratch that angle. But I was like, I really want that angle. I want to have, I want to tie it together that way, with Shazam looking down on the parking lot. So they did create that whole parking lot from that angle. I think they did a great job. I mean, they did that from scratch.
Yeah. All of my family gets.
Now, when we shot this, we had a big piece of glass between them. What I discovered on the day, like, we put up that big piece of glass, and I stood on one side, someone else stood on the other side, and you could not hear a single word the other person said. That glass was like soundproof, and I was like, oh crap, like how are they going to act if they can't hear each other? But they were able to do it. I mean, they knew their lines, and I guess they did it just by seeing each other's emotions or something. But yeah, they did it, even though it was like impossible to hear each other. This is a shot I love. I wanted to have him, going down this, whatever that's called, that sort of corridor, because I wanted him to come in there, and he's kind of silhouetted, and you just see the bolt lit up and everything. And the first AD was trying to talk me out of it, because it's like that location was not near any other location. And it was like, do you really need it? Can you just like, he heads to the stadium, then he's inside the stadium, and you're done. It's like, you gotta have that. You gotta have a little build up and like a cool shot of him walking in there. So we did shoot it. And of course, again, I mean, here we couldn't shoot this in a real stadium, so it's all blue screen. But they did a great job with putting the stadium in. I mean, the look of this final fight is like, it turned out really well. Him like rising up here, I think is really cool. Like this and the next shot of him was something that was super important to me because I was like, this could be like a trailer shot. It has to look cool. Because originally, the way it was shot much brighter with the intention of making it darker. And I had to keep telling them, no, make him darker, make him more silhouetted. Like it needs to look really graphic and cool. And I want lightning right behind him. Like it needs to look graphic, like a comic book. Yeah, and I thought him flying through the fire, I think, turned out cool as well. Now, when we're shooting this stuff out in the parking lot, we have giant lights flashing to sort of simulate the lightning and the fire and all of that. Now, that there was an image that flashed really quickly on that scoreboard. It's an image of the Marcel Wade, I think he's our made-up baseball player that Pedro has a crush on. That's him that we put in there. Like this shot is like one of my favorites. This was something that was added a little later as well because we realized that Shazam was mostly like running away from the dragon. And that's not very heroic. Like we needed him to like actually like punch the dragon. So we added that. And I mean, the thing is when you're doing a lot of these, especially wide shots, are all animation, so you can do almost anything you want in post. It's only when you have like there's certain shots of Shazam that where you have to use what you have or pick up little shots on blue screen. But otherwise, you can do almost anything. And now his suit is pretty much black. VFX were like, isn't he going to look like Black Adam? It's like, well, so what? I just want to see him in a black burnt suit before he dies. The music here, again, Chris Beck, I think he did such a good job. Like it feels really epic, really epic. The thing was when we were on the soundstage mixing this, I was like, it doesn't feel epic enough. Well, what happened? Like, it's not getting there. Like I was like, can you turn it up more? Is that what the problem is? And it turned out that they forgot to put in the choir that was muted. But as soon as you put the choir back in, it's like, yes, there it is. That shot with the big dome lighting up, that's sort of an Akira reference, where I was inspired by Akira for that shot.
A true god, after all.
Now for the dome disappearing and the smoke coming out, I collected a lot of reference of like soap bubbles with smoke in them that were filmed in slow motion. Like you pop a bubble with smoke in it and it sort of pours out. And this shot here is actually all CG. We shot Calypso double on the ground, like facing away. But it's like, I didn't like the pose. So it's like, I wanted something like that instead. And they were able to use the digidoubles and create it. Now here, when they're falling through unicorns, they were all sitting on these rigs that were kind of like dunk tank rigs, like they were sitting on them and then you just pull away the thing they're sitting on and they just fall down on the ground. But they fell into like padding, of course. That was fun to shoot, to just have them all fall down.
Billy! 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 Billy!
Yeah, I like the look of this sort of smoky, burnt out stadium. This was all, you're shot on a soundstage, we had a bunch of leaves on the ground, like burnt leaves. And again, we couldn't have actual smoke because of the kids. So this is all added. But I think they did quite well. And then we have Billy with his burnt face.
You're supposed to wake up. You're supposed to open your eyes and laugh. And
here, Christoph
you got me.
Chris Beck, he wrote a piece of music that was really good for this moment. But I felt that it felt more real without music. If you're just like, you're just in this moment with him and there's just nothing to sort of tell you how to feel or, because I didn't want to, try to make you cry or anything like that. I just wanted to present it as it is. And I think that's more powerful. But we have the music coming in a little later here. Yeah, I think Jack did a great job with freaking out. There was a lot of back and forth getting that burnt face just right because I wanted it to feel a little wet, a little fresh. And the stuff they did at first felt drier and like a little more zombie-like he had been dead quite a while. And I was like, no, he needs to feel like he just, he just got burnt. Yeah, and then we pull back and go into our Garden of Atlas, or the God Realm. Originally in the script, there was a whole sort of burial scene where they actually lower Billy into the grave and everything, and it's just it's just going to eat up too much time. So it was during the shoot that I was just like, let's just have the grave be already there. And I think that was the last thing we shot with, or would have been the last thing to shoot with Asher. So all of a sudden it was just like, well, we're not doing that. So I guess you're done, Asher. You didn't have to play dead. Now there's this lightning bolt on the grave. That was a post ID I had. It's like, I wish we would have shot, because you see Freddy do that little thing with his fingers in the sand, and I was like, I wish he would have, drawn a lightning bolt on the grave, and
Stuff he's drained.
we had them add that. That was Rise did this whole scene, so they had to add it in quite a few shots. It turned out great. And we're about to see the real Wonder Woman. Now, because of scheduling and things, of course, we start the shot with her head cut off as a nod to the headless Superman in the first movie, to just for a brief moment go like, are they going to do that thing again? It's like, nope, we actually had Gal here. Although we didn't have her there. Because of scheduling, her part of it was shot in London. So we had to shoot the whole scene with a double. So some of these shots is a double, like that's a double. But we shot all of the coverage with the double just to figure out, so we could then cut the scene together and figure out what exactly we needed Gal for and what the shots would be, and record how high up was the camera, what lens was it, and all of these things, so we could put her in there afterwards. Now, at the time, I couldn't go to London because of a visa issue. It would have been too difficult for me to get back into the country, and I needed to get back into the country quickly to finish this movie. So I had to shoot it or direct it remotely. So there was a crew in London, and I was in my home in LA. And so I had one screen with a feed from the camera, and then I had one screen with a Zoom call where I could direct and talk to everyone. But it worked out really well. I mean, Gal was super nice, and she was willing to do more than we had originally asked from her, and she does a great job, because when she's talking to Shazam early on, she's just talking to a tennis ball, and it feels like there's chemistry there. Now you can see the hair there first coming up is not Zach. So we had a stunt guy do the first bit with the hand, and as the head starts coming out, and then for Zach's bit, he didn't have to have his head underground. He could start with his head above ground and then come up from there.
I didn't see you there. I was.
But yeah, so this,
time.
is all. He's talking to a double, she's talking to a tennis ball, but it worked out really well. And after that shoot was over, I was telling my wife how well it worked out, and she was like, well, don't get any ideas. She was like, are you going to want to shoot every movie just from your home now remotely? But no. I mean, the thing was, the reason it worked out so well was that we had shot everything with a double and knew exactly the shots we needed and knew exactly how the camera was angled and everything. And it's interesting, even when she walks away at the end, there's a moving camera, and Julia, the DP, was like, oh, we should, have the camera move with her. And I was like, well, don't we need to use motion control for that to like make it all line up? It's this shot coming up right after this.
Stick to saving.
But he was like, no, you're not going to see your feet, this one here. So it's going to be okay. And it works really well. So that was just shot with 2 different moving cameras put together. And yeah, I buy it.
We can do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good.
This set here, we had like a quarter of this area. So we have part of the tree, we have the grave, and we have some of that little plaza, and then extended all the rest of it. And here's the rebuilt house. So we shot all the stuff in the old house first. Then we went away and shot some other stuff while they changed the house around, as if they, had to rebuild it and renovate it and, have a different look to it. So I guess this is now the house they live in. You can see that Mary's wearing an Oxford shirt. That was sort of, we had a little extra bit of dialogue here originally that sort of closed her whole arc about, wanting to go to college. So now she's like, yeah, she's going to college and she doesn't have to be with her family every single moment. They can do things on their own now. This was fun seeing Jaimin in this thing. And yeah, Jack was improvising. He's pimping now. But, Jaimin is like a model. And he is, I think he has been a model. And so, he can wear anything and look good.
You were just in the neighborhood?
Okay, I came for the staff. Perhaps I will hold on to it for now. I also wanted to see your faces one last time before I turn into a pile of ash.
Wait, what?
No.
I'm making a joke. I have an Uber waiting. Besides, I've been trapped in rocks and prisons for far too long. It's time to see your world. It's been an honor, a privilege watching you all soar.
You're not such a bad wizard.
Thank you, Jeff.
Never ends.
Also, what's my superhero name?
Your name is Shazam.
Of course.
I still think we can beat it.
Yeah, coming up are our great credits done by Aspect. I like having credits at the end. I guess that's kind of the standard now with most movies, but it's like I kind of want to get into the movie right away, not do too much in the beginning. Like in the opening shot with the museum, when we first see the title of the movie, I originally wanted that shot to be much longer. I wanted it to be kind of like a Luc Besson thing. Like if you've seen Fifth Element or Nikita or Leon, a lot of his movies, they start out with a traveling camera that's pointed straight down. And then after a while, it tilts up and shows something like, in Leon, it's like it's down at the water and then tilts up and shows New York. Or in Fifth Element, it's like out in space or something, I think, and shows the evil planet or whatever it is. I kind of wanted to do that and have the camera travels like that and it tilts up and we see the Acropolis and we see the New Line Cinema presents, Shazam, Fury of the Gods. But we weren't allowed to fly the drone for such a big distance. There's a lot of rules with that. So that's what you see there in the beginning was the most distance we could have. But Aspect, so I was talking to Aspect, like, what can we do here? I don't want to have just a black screen with the text on it, and then we just fade up and then it's there. But they came up with that solution of going through the Shazam text, which I think worked out really well. I like having like fun credit sequences like that you want to stick around for. and look at because they're interesting enough and they're fun. They're not just like cool. There are things to look at, and little details. And you can see the people that are dead. Rizwan and Diedrich, their characters are dead, so they're ghosts, and PJ is not. So, and then there's a whole letter there that Shazam wrote to Wonder Woman that you can probably read if you pause it. Yeah, this is the first movie where I have a David F. Sandberg film credit, which is, a bunch of bull because it's a lot of people making a movie. But it's pretty cool to have that credit for your ego. But yeah, it takes a village. And then we have our little extra scene here with the characters from Peacemaker and Suicide Squad. It was something we put together pretty quickly, and I was very happy that Jen and Steve could come out and do it. This was something we shot just behind the studio, behind Black Hall in Atlanta. And this whole production design, they built this whole old abandoned gas station. Because I was like, well, we got to have something there. You can't just shoot bottles on, on the ground or something. And I was like, how about like an abandoned gas station? And they built this whole thing and it looked great. Like I wanted to shoot like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of movie out there or something. It looks so good.
What the hell?
And that's the thing as well. It's always a shame that you don't see everything built because there's much more stuff out of frame.
Don't worry about that either. Look, we've seen
that's such a shame that you don't see. And then there's also reference to me that you don't see. Like I'm online, I'm at Pony Smasher. So the gas station's, it's called like P Smash Gas or something like that, which is a very stupid name. So it's probably good that you don't see it, but it was in there. Yeah, it's a fun little scene with a little shout out to Marvel.
I just want to be in the Wonder Woman group. So that's you guys, right?
No.
Why are you so obsessed with Wonder Woman, dude?
I know Zach had a lot of fun shooting those bottles. I mean, they were all just rigged up to explode, but they would explode whenever he pointed to them. So we did a few takes of that. Yeah, I like that we can do this little scene. I mean, now these two post-credit scenes we have, they don't really set anything major up or anything. They're just fun little things. I mean, on the first one, I had one of them was just a deleted scene that I wanted to get in there. And yeah, we're at the very end there. We have the Sivana scene, which was another one, just like with Gal, I shot it remotely. So I did, I put together like a little animatic. I rebuilt the whole cell in Blender from, I took stills from the first movie and like rebuilt it so I could do a little animation of like exactly how I wanted the camera. I mean, it's a very tiny space, so there's not a lot you can do. But I wanted to be as specific as possible since I couldn't actually be there. I could only be there on Zoom. But I was very happy to have Mark come back and just to have a little, get to see Mr. Mind again, that he's still around. He's still working on his plans, even though we didn't get to see what he's up to in this movie, but maybe we'll see that in the future. And just like in the first movie, I'm doing the voice for Mr. Mind because why not? So I have 2 cameos in this movie. Yeah. But I guess that's about it. But stick around and look at all the names of all these brilliant people who made this movie happen. I mean, yeah, like I said, it takes a lot of people. I mean, just look at all the names of the VFX artists. There's a ton of them. They did a hell of a job. So, yeah, thank you for checking out the movie.